She wanted the perfect wedding cake. But what she got was a curse that almost took her husband's life. This is not just a love story, it's a battle between pride, pain, and true love. My dear friends, please support me by clicking the subscribe button. Your support means so much to me. Let's grow this family together, thank you so much. Story begins. In the heart of Banjul, the Gambia, there lived a beautiful young woman named Grace. She was the kind of woman full of joy and excitement. Her wedding was only 2 weeks away, and she was finally going to marry the man of her dreams, Ethan. Ethan was tall, gentle, and full of wisdom. He wasn't a rich man, but he had the kind of heart money couldn't buy. He loved Grace with everything he had. The two had met at a youth seminar in town and quickly became best friends before falling in love. Everyone around them was happy. Family members were helping with wedding preparations, friends were picking out outfits, and Grace's younger cousins were already practicing their dance moves for the reception. Everything seemed perfect. But Grace had one small problem. And it was a big problem to her. I still haven't found the perfect cake, she told her best friend, Annabelle, one afternoon. Annabelle laughed, thinking Grace was joking. You have your dress. You've booked the hall. You've even hired live drummers. What's so special about the cake? Grace folded her arms and looked out the window. Her voice dropped a little. I don't just want any cake, Annabelle, I want something different. Something magical. Magical. Yes. A cake that makes people talk about it for years. Something no one has ever seen before, Grace said with dreamy eyes. Annabelle sighed. She knew her friend too well. Once Grace set her mind on something, there was no stopping her. Well then, Angela said, we better start looking. Because no one around here sells magical cakes. That night, Grace went online, scrolling through wedding cake pictures for hours. She saw round ones, tall ones, cakes shaped like castles, and even one shaped like a handbag. But none of them felt special enough. None of them gave her that strange feeling in her chest. She closed her phone and whispered to herself. There has to be a cake out there. My cake. The next day, while visiting a small market in the nearby village of Sarakunda, she overheard two women talking beside a fruit stand. One of them said, you know that old woman who bakes strange cakes in Brikama? My cousin said she saw a cake that looked like it was breathing. The other woman replied, breathing K. You people like to lie. Is she baking cake or calling spirits? They both laughed, but Grace stopped in her tracks. Sorry to interrupt, she said politely, but did you say there's a cake baker in Brikama? The first woman looked at her and nodded. Yes. People say she lives on the edge of the village. Her name is Mama Sessi. But be careful, that woman is not ordinary. Grace smiled and thanked them, but deep inside, she felt excited. Her heart beat fast. She believed this might be it. The place where she would find her perfect cake. That evening, Grace went home and wrote in her wedding journal. Tomorrow, I will go to Brikama. I will find Mama Sessi. And I will get the most magical cake in the Gambia. She had no idea that what she was looking for was not magic, but a nightmare waiting to happen. The sun was barely up the next morning when Grace put on a simple dress, tied her hair in a scarf, and boarded a taxi heading to Brikama. The driver, an old man with a gap-toothed smile, asked where she was going. Just take me to the edge of the village, she replied. The driver said, scratching his head. Not many people go there. What are you looking for, if you don't mind me asking? A woman named Mama Sessi. I heard she bakes cakes. The driver suddenly stopped smiling. Mama who? Mama Sessi. He looked straight ahead and nodded slowly. Ah. Okay. I'll take you there, but once I drop you, I'm not staying. Grace didn't understand his fear, but she didn't ask more questions. She was focused. Determined. After all, how bad could a cake baker be? 30 minutes later, they reached a quiet part of Brikama, a dusty road with thick trees and no other buildings in sight. There was only one small house made of red mud bricks, with a crooked wooden sign outside that read, Sessi's Creations, Cakes That Speak. Grace stepped out of the car and looked around. The house was silent. Too silent. Even the birds weren't singing. Good luck, the driver said quickly, then drove off without waiting for payment. Grace walked slowly to the front door and knocked. No answer. She knocked again. Then, the door creaked open by itself. Grace's heart jumped. She stepped in. The inside of the house looked like something out of a storybook. Cakes of all shapes and sizes sat on wooden shelves. Some were glowing softly. One looked like a swan. Another looked like it had real diamonds on it. And the smell, sweet, spicy, mysterious. It filled the air and wrapped around her like a warm blanket. Suddenly, a voice spoke from the dark corner. "I've been expecting you." Grace turned quickly. An old woman stood there, short, round, and wearing a long purple wrapper. Her skin was dark like roasted cocoa, and her eyes were almost white. She had no walking stick, yet she moved as if she floated. "Are you Mama Ceci?" Grace asked. "Yes. And you're the bride looking for the perfect cake." Grace blinked in surprise. "How do you know that?" Mama Ceci smiled. Not a warm smile. A knowing, sharp smile. "I know many things." She pointed at a cake on a golden table. It was unlike anything Grace had ever seen. It was tall, white like snow, with deep red roses climbing up the sides. Tiny silver butterflies sat on top, and the icing shimmered like glass. Grace walked closer. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "That cake is not just beautiful," Mama Ceci said. "It's powerful. It's alive." Grace frowned. "Alive? Yes. It feels love, and it feels pain. If your love is true, the cake will bless your marriage. If your heart is proud, the cake will punish." Grace didn't believe in such talk. "I'll take it," she said. Mama Ceci didn't move. No payment. No receipt. Just a warning. What kind of warning? The old woman stepped closer and looked her straight in the eye. "Once you pick this cake, your life will never be the same." Grace swallowed hard. But her pride took over. She wanted something no one else had ever had. Something unforgettable. "I'm not afraid," she said boldly. Mama Ceci nodded and turned around. "Very well. The cake will be delivered to you one day before your wedding. But remember, child, beauty sometimes hides evil." Grace left the bakery feeling strange. She didn't know if it was fear, or just excitement. Either way, she told herself, "This cake will make my wedding the best in the whole of Gambia." But as she walked away, Mama Ceci stood at her door, staring after her. Then she whispered, "Let the test begin." Grace woke up with butterflies in her stomach. Her house was full of excitement. Her mother was shouting instructions, cousins were running around with face powder and scarves, and Auntie Becky was dancing while frying plantain in the kitchen. Everything was perfect. Dress, stunning. Her hair, styled like royalty. Her groom, waiting at the altar with a smile that could melt hearts. Grace stood in front of the mirror and whispered to herself, "Today is the beginning of my forever." The wedding was held at a beautiful event center in Bacau, by the beach. The sun was shining, palm trees waved in the breeze, and traditional drummers played a soft rhythm as guests arrived dressed in colorful lace and fine suits. Ethan stood tall in a white agbada with gold embroidery. His friends teased him, but he only had eyes for Grace. And when she finally walked down the aisle, looking like a goddess in flowing white silk, the whole place went silent. Even the ocean seemed to pause. Everyone could see it, these two were deeply in love. After the vows were exchanged and rings were placed on fingers, Ethan kissed Grace's forehead and whispered, "You are my answered prayer." The crowd clapped and cheered. After the ceremony, the reception was full of laughter, music, and dancing. The food was delicious: jollof rice, fried chicken, grilled fish, salad, and soft drinks flowed like a river. But one thing had everyone talking. The cake. The white cake with red roses and silver butterflies sat at the center of the room on a golden table, covered with a shining glass case. No one had ever seen a cake like it. Some guests even whispered, "Is this cake real? It looks too perfect." Even Ethan was shocked. "Grace, where did you find this?" She smiled proudly. "Let's just say, it found me." Soon, it was time to cut the cake. Grace and Ethan stood behind it, holding the knife together as photographers gathered. The MC counted down. 3, 2, 1. Cut the cake. They sliced into it. And that was when it happened. Red liquid oozed from the cake. Not icing. Not jam. It looked like blood. People gasped. Someone screamed at the back. One woman dropped her glass. The power in the hall suddenly went out. Everything turned black. Only the cake glowed in the darkness, red liquid dripping from it like tears. Then the lights came back. And the cake looked normal again. No red. No dripping. Just sweet white icing and roses. Everyone looked around, confused. Some laughed nervously. Maybe it was part of the design, one guest said. Maybe the lights played a trick, another added. The MC clapped and said, "It's all part of the magic, ladies and gentlemen. Let's continue the celebration." The tension broke, and people continued eating and dancing. But Grace didn't laugh. Neither did Ethan. He leaned toward her and asked, "Did you see that?" "I did," she replied. "Was it part of the plan?" "No." Still, they smiled for the cameras, took pictures, and fed each other cake. But as Grace chewed her piece, she suddenly felt something hard in her mouth. She quickly spat it out into a napkin. It was a small black stone, cold, round, and smooth like it had been in water for years. She looked at Ethan. He saw it too. They didn't say anything. But in that moment, both of them knew. This cake was not ordinary. After the wedding reception, Grace and Ethan were taken to a quiet, cozy lodge just outside Sanyang Beach for their honeymoon night. The ocean breeze was soft, and the stars above glittered like diamonds. On the surface, everything seemed peaceful. But inside Grace's heart, something didn't feel right. She sat on the edge of the bed, holding the small black stone she had found in her cake earlier. Ethan came out of the bathroom and sat beside her. "You haven't said much," he whispered. I keep thinking about the cake," Grace replied. "That red stuff, the stone, it doesn't feel normal." Ethan nodded. "I feel the same. My chest's been heavy since I ate it." Suddenly, the lights blinked. Once, twice, then stopped. Ethan laughed lightly. Maybe the generator is tired too. They lay down and tried to relax. Grace turned off the lamp beside her, closed her eyes, and tried to push the strange thoughts out of her mind. But, as the night deepened, something terrifying happened. She began to dream. In the dream, she stood alone in a dark forest. The trees were black, the sky blood red, and the air smelled like smoke and metal. From the distance, she heard a voice calling her name. "Grace! Grace!" She turned around. A woman made of fire was walking toward her. Her face was burnt, her eyes glowing like coals. Her hair floated like flames in the wind. She was crying, but the tears were boiling. She pointed at Grace and screamed, "You took what was mine." Grace tried to run, but the ground opened beneath her feet. She fell, screaming. Suddenly, she woke up, gasping for air. She looked beside her. Ethan was sitting up, holding his chest. "Ethan, what's wrong? I can't breathe. I feel like something is sitting on me." Grace jumped out of bed and turned on the light. As soon as the light came on, they both saw it, the wedding cake. It was sitting on the table in their room. Whole again. Untouched. Grace screamed. "What is that cake doing here?" Ethan stood up, backing away from it. His nose started to bleed. "I don't know, we left it at the hall." The air in the room grew heavy. The walls seemed to close in. And then, they both heard it. A woman's laughter. Soft. Echoing. Grace ran to the window and threw open the curtains. But outside, there was no one. Only darkness and wind. Ethan leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. "Grace, I think we brought something evil into our marriage." She stared at the cake. The roses on it had turned black. The silver butterflies had melted. The cake now looked like it had been burnt and buried, then dug back up. Grace covered her mouth. "We have to get rid of it." She grabbed a towel and wrapped the cake quickly, even though it burned her hands as she touched it. They ran outside to the back of the lodge, dug a shallow hole with their bare hands, and buried the cake right there under the moonlight. They returned to their room in silence, hands shaking. And in the distance, a voice whispered through the wind. "You can't bury what belongs to me." After burying the cake and hearing strange voices whispering her name in her dreams, she decided to go back to where it all started. She didn't tell Ethan. She just took a taxi and headed straight to Brikama, back to that quiet, dusty road where she had first met Mama Ceci. But when she arrived, the bakery was gone. Not just closed, gone. No building, no table, no sign, just tall grass and an old mango tree. Grace stood there, shocked. No, this is the place. I remember that tree, the cracked rock, this is it." She walked around, searching, calling out, "Mama Ceci, are you there? I need answers." But the wind was the only reply. Just then, an old man with a gray beard walked by, balancing a basket of yams on his head. "Young woman," he said gently. "Are you lost?" Grace turned to him. "I'm looking for a woman called Mama Ceci. She bakes cakes. Her bakery used to be right here." The old man stared at her for a long time. Then he dropped his basket. "You saw Mama Ceci?" "Yes," Grace said. "Just last week. She gave me a wedding cake." The man slowly shook his head. "That's not possible. Mama Ceci died 20 years ago." Grace felt her knees weaken. "No, you're mistaken. I talked to her. I saw her cakes. She told me. Child, the man interrupted, I was there when she died. She burned with her house, right here on this land. Why? Grace asked, her voice trembling. The old man sighed and sat on a nearby rock. He patted the space next to him. Grace sat down, her heart beating fast. Then he told her the story. Mama Ceci's painful past. Many years ago, Mama Ceci was a joyful woman. She was known across Brikama for baking cakes that made people cry tears of joy. People came from far and wide just to taste her work. But her heart was broken. She had a daughter named Marian, beautiful, kind, and full of dreams. Marian fell in love with a young man who promised to marry her. She believed him. She gave him everything, her heart, her trust, and even her innocence. But just weeks before the wedding, he left her for a richer woman. Marian couldn't take it. She climbed the roof of her mother's bakery one morning and jumped to her death. Mama Ceci was never the same. They say she cried for 7 days without eating. On the 7th night, she locked herself inside the bakery with all her ingredients, and set it on fire. Some say she died in the flames. But others believe she became something else. A spirit, full of grief and revenge. A mother whose heart had turned to stone. Her soul refused to rest until she could punish every man who pretended to love. The cakes. They were no longer food. They became her curse, the old man whispered. She poured her pain into them. Especially the white one with red roses. That one was made for Marian's wedding day, but was never used. Grace felt her mouth go dry. Then why did she give it to me? Because you asked for the perfect cake, the man said. And Mama Ceci only gives people what their pride demands. Grace stood up, her legs shaking. How do I stop it? The old man looked her in the eye. You can't stop grief. But sometimes, you can break its chain. How? Find someone who still believes in love, real love. Someone who is not afraid of the spirit. Only then can you bury her anger forever. Grace thanked him and walked back to the road. Her hands were cold. Her feet felt heavy. But in her heart, a question screamed loudly. Will Ethan survive this, or will the cake take him away too? Grace rushed back to the lodge, heart pounding like a drum. Every step felt heavier than the last. The old man's words played over and over in her head. You asked for the perfect cake, and Mama Ceci only gives people what their pride demands. When she opened the door to their honeymoon room, she screamed. Ethan was on the floor, shaking. His eyes were wide open, staring at the ceiling. His lips were cracked. His body looked like it had been drained of energy. His hands were cold, and sweat poured from his forehead like rain. Ethan. Grace cried, falling to her knees. Please say something. His lips moved slowly. She's here. Who is here? The woman, made of fire. Suddenly, the room grew cold. The curtains moved even though the windows were shut. A terrible smell filled the air, like burning wood mixed with spoiled milk. And then the cake reappeared. Right in the middle of the room. Perfect. Untouched. The white icing sparkled. The red roses looked fresh. The silver butterflies danced gently, even though there was no wind. Grace screamed. We buried it. We burned it. Why won't it go away? Ethan sat up slowly, blood dripping from his nose. She wants my heart, he whispered. She said I'm like the one who betrayed her daughter. Grace grabbed a Bible from the drawer and held it tightly. You're not him, Ethan. You're not a liar. You love me. Ethan's eyes rolled back. He fell backward and began coughing violently. That was when Grace did something bold. She grabbed a wooden chair and smashed the cake. But the moment the chair touched it, the cake vanished. And something else appeared. Marian. The fiery woman from Grace's dream. Standing right there in the room. Her dress was torn, her skin burnt, and her eyes full of pain. She didn't speak. She just looked at Ethan, then turned to Grace. You chose pride over love. I didn't know, Grace cried. I just wanted my wedding to be special. You made my pain your decoration, Marian said. Then she began to walk toward Ethan. Grace jumped in front of her. No. Take me instead. Marian paused. For the first time, her burning eyes softened. Would you give your life for his? Yes. Grace shouted. If that's what it takes. Suddenly, the lights flickered again. The air changed. And Marian disappeared. The cake reappeared once more. This time, it was melting. Like a candle losing its shape. And then Ethan gasped, and began breathing normally. The curse was weakening. Grace cried, hugging him tightly. You're going to be okay, she whispered. But she knew deep down, this was not over. Not yet. The next morning, Grace went to the local church, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She had told no one what had happened, not her family, not her friends. Who would believe her anyway? But deep down, she knew this battle was bigger than her. It wasn't about a cake anymore. It was a war between love and pain. Life and death. She sat at the back of the church, silent, until a young priest noticed her. "Sister, do you need help?" he asked gently. Grace turned to him. "Yes. I need to fight a spirit." The priest looked confused, but then nodded. "Come. Sit. Tell me everything." She poured it all out: the dream, the bleeding cake, the reappearing dessert, the fiery ghost, the story of Mama Ceci and her daughter Marion. The priest listened quietly. His name was Father Jude. When Grace finished, he stood up, walked to a shelf, and pulled out a small white candle, an old wooden cross, and a bottle of holy oil. "I've never heard of a spirit trapped in a cake," he said, "but I've seen darkness before. If this curse is real, only fire that loves can fight fire that hates." Grace stared at the candle. "What do I do?" "At midnight," Father Jude said, "light this candle in front of the cake. Pray with all your heart. Do not run. Do not break your focus. The spirit may try to scare you, or even take you. But don't give in. Speak love. Speak truth." That night, Grace returned to the lodge. Ethan was asleep, breathing better. His skin had color again. Grace placed the candle, cross, and holy oil on the table and waited. At exactly midnight, the cake reappeared, this time melting, hissing, and whispering in voices that didn't sound human. She lit the candle. The flame turned blue. The air grew heavy. Suddenly, the lights blew out. The windows slammed shut. And the fiery ghost of Marion stepped forward, her body glowing, her face twisted in pain. She screamed, "Why do you fight me? He must pay." Grace held the candle and shouted back, "He did nothing to you. Ethan is not your enemy. He's a man. All men are liars." "No." Grace cried. "Ethan is different. He loves with his whole heart. He honors me. He prays with me. He respects me. And I would die for him." The ghost stopped. Something changed. Her eyes no longer burned with hate, but with sorrow. Tears fell down her cracked cheeks, real tears, not fire. "You would die for love," she whispered. "Yes," Grace said, with tears running down her face. "Because love is not pride. Love is not about showing off. Love is about sacrifice." There was silence. Then Marion looked at the candle. The blue flame flickered, and turned to gold. The cake behind her crumbled into ash. The room became warm again. And Marion, she smiled for the first time. "Tell my mother. I forgive her." Then she vanished, a gentle wind carrying her soul out through the window. The silence was deep. Grace collapsed to her knees, sobbing. She looked at the candle. It had burned all the way down, and from its base, a tiny red rose had bloomed. Ethan was still asleep, breathing gently. His face looked calm, free from pain, fear, or sickness. Grace sat up and touched his hand. Warm. Alive. She let out a deep breath she didn't realize she had been holding. The nightmare was over. The cake was gone. And the curse was broken. Grace stood and walked to the table where the candle had burned the night before. In the middle of the wax, something had grown, a tiny red rose, glowing softly. She smiled. "Thank you, Marion," she whispered. Later that day, Grace told Ethan everything. The ghost. The curse. The sacrifice. The priest. Everything. He listened in silence. When she was done, he pulled her close and said, "You saved me. You saved us." "No," she replied. "Love saved us." The newlyweds moved back to Banjul, away from the lodge, away from the bad memories. But Grace was no longer the same. She no longer cared about perfect pictures or fancy things. She didn't want attention or admiration anymore. Instead, she wanted to live simply. Humbly. Gratefully. She used her savings to open a small cake shop. Not with glowing cakes or wild designs. Just simple, sweet, loving cakes made with joy. She called it Gracie's Love Bites. Her cakes became known for one thing, meaning. Every cake had a message. Every cake had a prayer. And every customer left with more than dessert, they left with a little bit of hope. One day, a young bride came to her shop. She looked proud, excited, and full of ideas. "I want the perfect cake," the girl said. "Something the whole country will talk about." Grace smiled gently and handed her a small vanilla cake with soft cream and handwritten words on top. "Let love be enough." The bride frowned. "That's it. That's everything," Grace said. The girl left confused. But Grace stood behind the counter, calm and happy. Ethan walked in with a bag of flour and kissed her cheek. Still changing lives, I see. One cake at a time, she said with a wink. They laughed. Outside, the sun rose high over the Gambia. And somewhere in the spirit world, a mother and her daughter smiled too, finally at peace. And that was the story of Grace and the cursed wedding cake from the beautiful land of the Gambia. A story of pride, pain, love, and sacrifice. Grace wanted the perfect cake, but what she found was a deep reminder. Love is not in the show. It is in the soul. In the end, it wasn't money, it wasn't a big event, and it wasn't even the cake that saved her marriage. It was pure love, the kind that protects, forgives, and never gives up. And what about Mama Ceci? What about Marion? Two souls hurt by the past, but finally set free when one woman chose love over pride. Cue soft background music, emotional, hopeful. Thank you for watching this story. If it touched your heart, please do me a small favor. Subscribe to this channel. Like this video. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Would you eat a mysterious cake like Grace did? And remember, every week, I bring you more emotional, powerful, and true to Africa stories from across the continent. From the Gambia to Ghana, from Nigeria to South Africa, African stories live here. See you in the next video. I love you all. Bye.